Notice is hereby given that the Zoning Board of Appeals of the Town of Islip will hold a public hearing on Tuesday, March 18, 2025, on the following applications at the times listed or as soon thereafter as they may be reached. At such time, all interested parties will be given an opportunity to be heard. Application number 119-25, Anthony Maldonado and Gina Maldonado. Permission to leave above-ground pool having side yard of 13.4 feet instead of required 14 feet, and shed having side yard of 1.14 feet instead of required 2 feet. Residence A District, west side of Grundy Avenue, 417.25 feet south of Benning Lane, Holbrook.
Good evening. My name's Gina Maldonado, resident of 1032 Grundy Avenue, Holbrook, New York, 11741.
Good evening, and you're here just on the pool and the shed?
Yes.
All right, any questions from the board?
No.
No. Planning, any comments on this application?
No comment.
Is there anyone else who would like to be heard in this application? No, I'll take a motion, please.
Make a motion to approve the application.
Second, all in favor? Aye. Aye, application is granted.
Thank you.
Application number 120-25, Erica Pancho Vasquez. Permission to leave in-ground pool having side and rear yard of 13.6 feet instead of required 14 feet. Equipment having rear yard of 2 feet, and pool patio having side yard of 3.5 feet and rear yard of 3.8 feet instead of required 6 feet each. Roofed over patio having rear yard of 0.4 feet instead of required 2 feet, and 6-foot fence on property line not having required setback of 10 feet. Residence A District, southwest corner of Oxford Street and Comac Road, Islip.
Hello, hi.
Your name and address, please?
Erica Poncho, 2 Oxford Street, Islip, New York, 11751.
Thank you. Any questions from the board at this time? Planning, any comments?
Just that the fence is the only notable thing, but it's very close to the exception, well within normal board grants.
Great, thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to be heard in this application? All right, take a motion, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll make a motion to grant the application.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, your application is granted.
Okay, thank you.
Application number 121-25, Christine Fleischman and Andres Perez. Permission to erect second-story addition, leaving second front yard of 21.2 feet instead of required 22 feet. To leave 6-foot fence having front yard of 0.4 feet instead of required 10 feet, and 4-foot chain link fence in driveway and on corner site distance triangles. Residence A District, northeast corner of Wicks Road and McKinley Avenue, Brentwood.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Charles J. Broody, architect, representing the homeowner, 30 Bethesda Lane, Sayville, New York, 11782. As stated in the call, a homeowner seeks permission to construct a second-floor addition with permission to maintain an existing side yard setback, which is the second corner, of 21.2 feet instead of the required 22 feet, and to leave a 6-foot fence and a 4-foot fence on the property line.
Similar to the last case, it's very close to the exception, just like a couple hundred feet above what would normally be as of right. And the fence on the side triangle is called out specifically as chain link for a reason.
Is anyone else would like to hear this application?
I'll motion to grant the application. Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Application is granted.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Application number 122-25, Michael Cezanne. Permission to leave above-ground pool having side yard of 12.8 feet and rear yard of 9.7 feet instead of required 14 feet each. Pool deck having side yard of 8 feet and rear yard of 9 feet instead of required 10 feet each. Equipment having side yard of 2 feet and rear yard of 3 feet instead of required 6 feet each. Shed having side yard of 0.7 feet instead of required 2 feet and 11 feet behind the front line of the dwelling instead of required 20. Shed having side yard of 0.5 feet instead of required 2 feet, and patio on side property line not having required setback of 4 feet. Residence A District, east side of Secatog Lane East, 700 feet south of Bay 8th Street, West Islip.
Good evening, Christine Fay, Accurate Expediting, 286A Belmont Avenue, West Babylon, 11704. Ready?
Yeah.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My client seeks variance as stated. We feel the variances are in keeping with the nature and character of the neighborhood. They do not cause adverse effect on the environment or neighborhood. The benefit cannot be achieved by alternative means. The structures are existing. Even though the difficulty was self-created by the applicant, we feel they're not substantial. I've submitted supporting documentation from Willets Point Association along with miscellaneous granted Variances in Willets Point. We understand that there is a concern from the rear yard neighbor about water that seeped onto their property due to the homeowner draining the water off the cover of his pool. The hose came out and the water seeped over. My client has spoken to the neighbor and will ensure that his hose properly drains when he has to perform the same procedure again. It was an accident. My client is here if you have any questions for him about the water. And I'd like the board to consider granting.
Do you have the name of that neighbor?
Yes.
We do have one letter in opposition in the folder,
Right, that's the letter.
and we have a letter of support from the Willett Point Association.
Yes.
Continue.
If you have any questions regarding the water
Any
seeping
questions
over.
from the board then, at this time? No? Planning, any comments?
So this particular property had a few more significant issues that are at this point not represented in the call meeting, mostly concerning the decks. But those have already been scaled back, so they're not, as I said, currently represented. Given that, I'd say most of the major issues that would have been for this property have already been resolved. So at this stage, I don't really have anything to comment otherwise.
Okay, is there anyone else that would like to be heard in this application? Okay, then I'll take a motion, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll make a motion that we grant the application.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Application
Thank
granted.
you.
Application number 123-25, 313 Southport LLC. Permission to establish accessory apartment pursuant to Islip Town Code Section 68-602, and to leave patio having side yard of 0.4 feet instead of required 4 feet. Residence A District, north side of Southport Street, 142.8 feet east of 17th Avenue, Ronkonkoma.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Roxanne Trella, Dynamic Expediting Services, with offices at 231 Islip Avenue, Islip, New York. We're here tonight to establish an accessory apartment. The apartment is 693 square feet. The dwelling is owner-occupied, and the driveway has been approved by engineering.
Okay, is there any questions from the board at this time? Planning, any comments on this?
No comment.
Is there anyone else that would like to be heard in this matter? If you please come up.
Step up.
Come up. No,
You gotta-
ma'am,
Gotta go to the microphone.
we're going to ask you for your name and address, please, when you get to the podium.
Marie Bender, 315 Thrift Street, Ronkonkoma, New York.
Okay?
So this apartment is...
Ma'am,
the-
ma'am,
Oh, sorry. Marie Bender, 315 Thrift Street, Ronkonkoma, New York. I'm trying to understand, and so are my neighbors, is this apartment already there, or they're trying to build on more?
yeah.
Okay. Okay, because I will keep calling the town on whoever you're representing, because they are bringing down my
Can you
neighborhood.
speak to us, ma'am? We need to hear you.
Sorry, my neighborhood is not
Wait,
commercial.
Wait, just hang on. So you know, we decide the issue, so you really want us to hear.
Okay.
Thank you.
My neighborhood is not commercial. My parents bought the house I live in 1975, still there. I opened my front door, and all the neighbors around are bothered by landscaping trucks being worked on in the backyard, a trailer. She's knocking on doors saying the trailer's there because I'm storing my kids' toys in it. Clearly says the name of the landscaping company. If you have a landscaping company, you do not belong storing all your stuff on your home property and destroying the neighborhood. I mean, there's a house for sale around the corner. You look at the listing, you look through their chain link backyard, what do you see? Their trailer, a truck, another thing that looks like it's gonna get a tarp over it. It's just destroying my neighborhood. It's killing me. It is absolutely killing me. And I have pictures of currently today that the neighbor took pictures of what today, right before I came here, looks like.
Do you have pictures you'd like to submit to us?
Sure. I mean, they're on my phone.
No?
Can't take it.
You don't want us to take your phone?
Give us the phone, for the record.
I mean, I've reached out You know, again, I know the house was bought with an apartment in it, but I was concerned that they were going to build something else. It's bad enough to have their workers coming when they first moved in, pot smoking.
Can I
It's
ask
a
you-
neighborhood.
Can I ask you a question? Are you saying that they store commercial vehicles there?
Well, right now it's a trailer. The vehicle, the big vehicle, the big dump truck vehicle has now been moved because I've complained and had to follow through and had to deal with Kara Welling and all these other people.
What does it say on the trailer?
I'll read it to you. Canales Marvin Landscaping.
All right, we get it. Maybe we'll hear. Anything else?
Is that the same?
Yes, a neighbor.
That's the backyard. That's what my neighbors are looking at. That's what I'm looking at when I look out my front door.
Is that,
It's not fair.
is that a driveway or is that just parked on the grass?
No, that's parked on the grass in the backyard. If you pull up the listing for the house that's for sale on 17th, that's part of their listing. You see the side of that.
All right, if you finish, let's hear from the applicant's representative. Roxanne, help us out.
I believe that there was an initial complaint for the commercial vehicles. That was one of the reasons that she came into our office. We did meet with code enforcement, and the commercial vehicles were removed. We did an inspection, and as far as I was aware of, they hadn't been brought back.
But-
I will
But the
touch
applicant-
base.
but this
Well,
young
she said the
lady-
commercial
hang on,
vehicles
hang
are
on,
not there,
hang on.
just the trailer.
Hang on. I was about to say something.
Sorry.
I'm going to continue to say.
Okay.
This young lady said this morning, or this afternoon, there's a commercial trailer there. I thought you said they were removed.
So the commercial vehicles were removed. The trailer is new. I did not see it when we were there with code enforcement. I will address this with the property owner and advise them that the trailer is not permitted to be there and that it must be removed immediately. And we will have a follow-up inspection with code enforcement to verify that everything has been removed.
Let me just ask, ma'am, if
Yeah.
you finish, we'll give you as much time as you want. Ma'am, can I ask you some questions? You'll have to go to the podium.
Sure.
Sorry.
Is this a continuous issue? How long-
Ever since they moved in,
And how-
maybe
Speak to the
2, 3 years
microphone,
ago.
please.
Sorry.
And how long has this been going on?
I probably have emails back to 2022, 2023.
Wow. All right, I get it.
I mean, the adjusters or inspectors that were coming out, I said, come to my front door, stand on my porch, stand in my living room. I open my windows, that's what I see. Don't want to see it. I mean, at one point, they had to wash, sorry. Okay. At one point, they had to wash a dryer outside, working. Thank you.
No, I mean, I wasn't aware that there was still an issue. As far as I knew, code enforcement had cleared it. Now that we are aware, we will call the property owner tomorrow morning. We'll make sure that those things are removed, and we will request a reinspection with code enforcement and ask that we be kept in the loop if there are any additional complaints made on the property.
Would be the 6th or the 27th?
We're going to motion to adjourn it to May,
Sorry.
one of the dates you accept.
Okay, I can take May 6th, that's fine.
May 6th?
And if I may just may, and then. Okay, here's what we're doing. Here's what we're doing.
Can't speak unless you're, it's okay.
Here's what we're doing. You don't have to bring pictures. We're adjourning this. We're not taking any action on it. We're going to adjourn it until May 6th. We invite you to come back in May 6th and educate us on what's going on. Has it been cleaned up, or is it the same old? Okay?
And if you have pictures at that time, you can submit them.
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry if I got upset.
No,
It's all right.
Maybe we need a motion.
So I can I get a motion for an adjournment, please?
I got a motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Matter is adjourned to May 6th. Thank you.
Second my own motion.
I got it. Application number 124-25, Dennis Garcia Sanchez. Permission to erect one-story addition, 12 by 19, leaving side yard of 5.8 feet instead of required 14 feet. To leave shed having side yard of 0.4 feet instead of required 2 feet. Pool patio on side property line and pool heater having side yard of 0.5 feet instead of required 6 feet each. And to use dwelling for two-family, family use only pursuant to Islip Town Code Section 68-419.1. Residence A District, north side of Woodbury Road, 927.79 feet north and east of Breton Road, Hapa.
Good evening again, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Roxanne Trella, Dynamic Expediting Services, with offices at 231 Islip Avenue in Islip. We are looking to establish two-family, family use only. It's for the mother-in-law of the property owner based on medical, and we have submitted the documentation to the Zoning Board of Appeals. There is also the pool heater on here, which we had reached out to zoning to see if it needed to remain on the call of the meeting or not, but the pool heater was actually CO'd in 2023. We're also here for the pool patio and the shed. The shed is undersized. It's 133 square feet. It was there when the pool heater was legalized, but unfortunately, I guess the survey didn't have the setbacks on it, so we weren't required to go for a variance at that time, but it is on the application now. And then that leaves us with the one-story addition. So that addition is for an attached garage. It is not going to be living space. In order for them to convert the existing garage to the two-family dwelling, they lost their garage, and they're looking to erect another one at the minimal size for a car to fit in it, which is 12 by 19. We did look at the other side of the property, that it has a slightly larger setback, but unfortunately all of the mechanicals are on that side of the property. They have their AC unit there, the gas meter is there, so it would be too much of a financial burden on them to move it to the other side of the property. So they were looking to erect it on this side.
So I don't really have too much to honestly add here, and that's because the call of the meeting kind of speaks for itself in this case. The setback being requested is just simply too significant. There's not really any support for it. I understand she's saying that it would be difficult for them to locate it somewhere else, but as has been described, they had a garage, but they still have, I believe, a one-car garage, and part of the reason this is even happening is I believe part of it was converted. It does seem like a self-created hardship, and even just more to the point, there's not really any support for having this structure this close to the side yard like that. Normally, an alternative would be to have a detached garage put behind the dwelling, but because they have the pool and all of that back there, they're simply trying to fit too much on this parcel, it seems.
I did speak to the clients about an alternative, which would be a detached garage, which would only require a 4-foot setback. They would have to move it 20 feet behind the front line of the dwelling, which may interfere with their patio and their pool, and it would bring up other issues such as the rear yard occupancy at that point. So I think they were just trying to see if this would work, but if, we understand that it is a large relaxation that's being requested.
Application, oh, and that's for a period of 3 years, right?
3 years, yes. Sorry.
Application number 125-25, Pedro Piero Fernandez and Alicia Valdez Castro. Permission to leave carport conversion having side yard of 8.8 feet instead of required 14 feet, and floor area ratio of 26% instead of permitted 25%. Second-story deck having side yard of 4.8 feet instead of required 14 feet. Patio having side yard of 2 feet instead of required 4 feet. Driveway having rear yard of 1 foot instead of required 4 feet. Shed having 2 feet behind the front line of the dwelling instead of the required 20 feet, and having front yard of 1.3 feet instead of required 20 feet. And 6-foot fence and driveway site triangle. Residence B District, northeast corner of Ackerson Boulevard and Chestnut Drive, Bay Shore.
Good evening again, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Roxanne Trella, Dynamic Expediting Services, with offices at 231 Islip Avenue, Islip, New York. Okay, so I'm going to start with the 6-foot fence and driveway site triangle. So that's actually just a small piece of concrete on the second front yard. They don't utilize it as a driveway, so we have spoken to them and to engineering. They will be removing the concrete that's in the town right-of-way and reseeding with grass, so that should eliminate the necessity for that variance. We have also spoken to them about relocating the shed, having 2 feet behind the front line of the dwelling, and a front yard of 1.3 feet. So the location that they would like to relocate it to would be right alongside of the house. It would eliminate the requirement of the 20 feet behind the dwelling. It would comply with that. However, the front yard, I think it would bring it to 18 feet instead of 20 due to the size of the shed and where they're relocating it. And we have the driveway with 1 foot instead of 4, the patio 2 instead of 4, the floor area ratio of 26% instead of 25. We were able to locate one precedent that granted 30% instead of 25, and that was ZBA number 295-17, granted on May 3rd, 2017 at 1442 Pine Drive in Bay Shore. Then we have the carport conversion with a side yard of 8.8 feet instead of the required 14 feet. So this is Residence B zoning, where the prior zoning was 10 feet, and it was changed to 14 feet in 1995. All of the houses on this block maintain the prior setbacks. They were all built prior to the zoning change. I was able to locate a couple of precedent. There wasn't too much as far as actual ZBA approvals, because all of these houses were built with this carport that was converted to living space. Some of the carports were converted to living space prior to the zoning change, so they didn't require zoning approvals. We did, however, find a couple. One was diagonally across the street. This was 1447 Ackerson, case number 702-24, and that was granted a side yard of 7.4. We have case number 295-17. That was granted 11.1 instead of 14. We have 1433 Ackerson. This was 7.5 granted in 2002. And then we have one more at 1449 Pine, but I couldn't get the survey to see what the exact setback was there. So most of the houses that are on this street, it looks like the carport was at some point converted. They either came before the board and were given approval, or they were granted their CO prior to the change. That brings us to the second-story deck, which they placed.
Hang on, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Ms. Trella. You gave us two locations, 7.4 and 7.5.
Yes.
The 11.1 I don't think is analogous, but it's great. Correct?
Correct. I think it just shows the nature of the neighborhood where all of these carports, where they were converted.
That's what I'm trying to find out. So we have two that are less than 8.8. I don't know if two are the nature and character of the neighborhood. When you tell us that there are a lot of conversions from carports to enclosures, that could be nature and I guess 60% of them or 50%. How many are there that you're saying that is significant for us to consider nature and character, even though they weren't by grants?
I would say, I'm pretty sure every house except for 2 or 3 have converted their carport into living space.
And what is the setback of the now existing living space?
So the ones that I gave you were the ones that I received the FOIL back, and I had the actual numbers. And from what I can see, the difference is some of these lots are 80 by 100, and some of them are 100 by 100. So the lots that were 80 by 100 received the greater setback, which are the 7.4, 7.5, and ours at 8.8. And then the one grant with the 11 was because they had 100 by 100, so theirs was a little bigger. But all of these houses were pretty much placed in the same location, same carport was built, and I would say way more than half of the houses have converted them.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. You want to continue on the deck?
Oh, so the deck, the second-story deck was erected, unfortunately, right above the carport conversion. So the deck itself maintains 8.8. Because of the platform that's required and the stairs descending from the deck, it brings it to 4.8. I have spoken to the property owners and asked if they would be willing to remove that platform and stairs to bring the deck in line with the carport conversion.
I'm looking at the photographs that are in our file, and honestly, even if we were to leave or permit the 8.8, that deck even goes, if I'm looking at the right pictures, it looks like the deck goes beyond. It looks like it's, am I incorrect?
So the 3x3 platform, that's what goes beyond the 8.8. So I've told them to remove that platform and the stairs, and that would bring just the deck itself to be in line.
Roxanne, I don't want to draw a wrong conclusion.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure.
Okay.
I'm going to circle the photograph, and if you'll take a look at it.
Of course.
Thanks, Jerry. I just want to make sure I'm correct.
Okay. Okay.
That's the deck.
I
Not looking good. From my perspective. You're looking right down. You wouldn't want to do something.
Yeah. That is the deck that we're speaking of, yes.
I don't see by moving a 3-foot landing is going to help it. It's still almost towering over the neighbor.
Right, it would maintain 8.8 instead of the 14.
Sure. First, I'd actually like to start with a question. I believe you mentioned, what is happening with the shed? I think you mentioned something about that.
I told them to move it from the second front. They're going to put it 20 feet behind the front line of the dwelling, but they want to put it right next to the house. And with the setback that the house maintains from the second front and the size of the shed, it's going to be 18 feet instead of 20 from the second front.
Okay.
So instead of the 1.3 feet, instead of the required 20 for the front yard setback, it would be 18 feet instead of the required 20 for the front yard. Right, it's going to be 20 feet back. It's just still front yard because it's the second front.
Okay, so then you mentioned the, which we discussed. The
Yes.
side triangle being called out is that sort of second driveway up on the north part that they don't really use. You're going to remove the driveway, which kind of just eliminates the need for this variance?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they're going to remove that little piece. The little patio in the back they use, they
Yeah.
have like their kids' toys there. They're going to keep that, but just that little patch that's in the town right away, they'll remove, and they're going to reseed and put grass there.
All right. Which leaves the only glaring issue, which Mr. Wexler was speaking to, is the second-story deck, which
Yes.
even without the platform, I still think is a problem.
I have discussed all of these concerns with the property
Yeah.
owner. They are very well aware. Unfortunately, they didn't seek the advice before erecting it, but they do understand. I would have told them to put it on the other side.
And I think the only thing then that's in contention, which was also being discussed, is the converted carport, which I would overall agree with your assessment. The precedent you cited is accurate, and this does appear to be a neighborhood that does have many converted carports. The specifics of those numbers are a bit vague. I guess what I can say is that one of the cases that is being cited was granted as recently as last year. That was 7.4. And I believe it was granted under much similar circumstances of sort of a nature and character argument in this neighborhood, that many of them, although it's not board grants, do appear to be close to the side yard. And that's just diagonally across the street here, very close by.
And it was last
That's
year.
1447 Ackerson, or no, 1446 Ackerson, I believe it was, so like right there. All right, I just looked this up, I should know this.
Right.
Rather removing the driveway, so yes.
Yeah, so it eliminates the
Removing
need
the
for the
issue.
variance, yeah. I mean, not me personally, I'm not going to take a hammer and nail to it, but the clients will do it. Okay, thank you.
Application number 126-25, Luis Antonio Rodriguez, permission to establish accessory apartment pursuant to Islip Town Code, Section 68-602, and to leave shed having rear yard of 0.3 feet instead of required 2 feet. Residence A District, north side of Spur Drive North, 400 feet west of Ohio Avenue, Bay Shore.
Good evening. My name is Salim Ibrahim. I reside at 3663 Fiddler Lane, Bethpage, New York, 11714. Good evening. I'm here to ask permission to keep our existing apartment in the basement, about 589 square feet. Awesome. Okay, sorry. An accessory apartment in the basement, accessory about 589 square feet, to be legalized. It does have a special cellar entrance towards the back. There's no access from the main dwelling to this area, and also is owner occupied. And regarding for the parking area, they have a 2-car garage in the back, and the car can be parked in the back of the house. They have space for that, for the area, for the parking area. Correct, yes, in the basement, correct. Mhm. Okay, so, quicker. Okay, the survey shows one way.
So you're asking the board consideration of having parking in the rear, is that what you're saying?
Correct. Because there's no more parking in front of the dwelling. They have one strip to go all the way to the car garage in the back. And they have an area also, a return area. What I'll be able to suggest is maybe redesign the parking in front, create a concrete pad on the front as a driveway. That should be able to compensate for the area, maybe under the 42% of lot coverage for the front yard of the dwelling. Yes, correct. Yes, correct. To make the front yard, accessible for the driveway, less than 42 square feet, 42% of lot coverage from the front yard. Thank you. Have a nice evening.
7-25, Carl Fund LLC, permission to leave driveway on side property line not having a required setback of 4 feet. Residence B District, east side of Carl Drive, 150 feet south of Damon Street, Bay Shore.
Good evening, I'm Jerry Baveja from Carl Fund LLC, 1067 Carl Drive, Bay Shore 11706.
You just here on the driveway, sir?
Yes, just a driveway, permission to leave the driveway on site as is, as we bought it.
Planning any comments on this?
So it is pretty routine for the board to be granting driveways on the rear yard, or right on the property line, I'm sorry. I don't love this one. It's basically the entire length of the side yard here. I don't think there's a single piece of landscaping for that entirety with that neighbor. It's really not ideal. That's the kind of thing that can cause drainage issues.
Yeah, we don't generally see that, do we? A driveway that goes the entire-
Usually, if it's at a 0 foot, it's either only at one point where maybe the driveway would widen out or something like that. But they have their detached garage right on the back there, so it goes all the way throughout the entire length of the property there.
It's too excessive. We have granted enlargements, but it's often a part, maybe at the apron, and then it tapers. Yours is the entire, and it goes all the way back. It's too much.
So we bought the house in November 2024, and it was as is, so,
But you step into the shoes of the seller. You don't, it's not like blame the other guy.
no, I'm not,
We have to deal with what is there,
okay,
and it's just too much. You're gonna have to cut back.
okay. I think as is, the person who was living, I asked them about the driveway when we were moving in, when I told, when we bought the house, and there's yeah, we've been at it, and the neighbors do not have any. Okay, I said the neighbors, I'm sorry, okay. All right. Okay, so when we bought the house from the owners in November of 2024, so we asked them about the driveway. He said yes, it's been like this. Okay.
They can tell you the sky, the moon was made of green sheets, it doesn't get accepted.
True.
You may have been misled by the owner, but that's not binding on us. Otherwise, everybody would say, the owner told, the owner said so.
And I'm sorry. And the neighbors too, I asked, so they did not have any problems with the driveway. So that's the. So if you required us to do it, I cannot say no, but if we can have it as is, because there are more houses in the neighborhood with the similar. Okay, sir. All right.
Granted 2 feet.
Thank you.
We are. Application number 128-25, Regency Centers, Citibank, NA. Permission to install 2 facial signs having height of 20.92 feet instead of permitted 18 feet each, with 1 sign not visible from the main thoroughfare. Business 3 District, northeast corner of Sunrise Highway and Broadway Avenue, through lot to Church Street, Holbrook.
Good evening, Chairman, members of the board. Patrick Rogers, Fast Forward Real Estate Consultants, 507 Sutton Place, Uniondale, New York, representing Regency Center, way of Citibank. Regency Center is the owner, and Citibank is the leasee. Just for a point of information, this request for the 2 signs actually is just for one of the signs. It's my understanding that there were 2 permits filed, 224214 and 224216. That's a Citibank B1. On the west tower is 224214 and 224216 was on the north tower. Okay. Sure. Correct. No, so the first sign was approved. So we have an approval and the sign is up. Yeah, we have a sign. No, we want another sign. So the application is not for 2 signs, it's for 1 sign. Because the other sign was already approved after the denial letter went out on October 24th of 2024. So there was some confusion with respect to the variance. So there was an approval of one of the signs. So we are only requesting 1 variance for an additional sign. So that you're allowed 2. Shush, certainly. Correct. They both do that. Correct. One is on the north side and one is on the west side.
And where is the second sign? Is that the one that's on the building itself?
Yes, it's on the north side.
It's, may I?
Well,
If you're going to speak, name and address.
It's on the north side.
so it's the same exact?
It's B2. It's called B2. If you have the plot plan, it should be B2.
Question for planning. Planning, were you prepared to support this application as it reads?
Yes?
Okay.
Is there anyone else who would like to be heard in this matter? No. Can I get a motion, please? All in favor? Aye.
Thank you. Sometimes it is. Less is more. Thank you.
Application number 129-25, Anthony Farafino and Stephanie Coda, planning to leave 6-foot fence having front yard of 1 foot instead of required 10 feet and driveway having side yard of 0.9 feet instead of required 4 feet. Residence AA District, northwest corner of Amboy Road and Trout Street, Oakdale.
Sir, your name and address?
Mitch Brendel, 2100 Middle Country Road, Center Reach, New York, 11720, agent on behalf of the applicant.
Okay, you have anything to say on the application?
Sure. We are seeking permission this evening to maintain an existing fence and an existing driveway. These have been, the fence has been there since at least 2001, according to GIS aerials, and the driveway was widened somewhere between 2016 and 2019. This is not a self-created issue. Our homeowner, our client acquired this residence in 2019 with these conditions.
Created. They didn't have to be the one.
They bought it in that condition.
Hang on. It's a term of art, when you say self-created, it means somebody created it. It's not as though part of the mountain fell off and there was an act of God.
Okay.
So your client created it, but it
Right.
was self-created by the predecessor. So it is self-created.
It was created by an individual, correct?
Yeah,
Not
so it is self-created.
our homeowner.
It's incorrect to say it's not self-created. It's
Okay.
not your client, but it's created by somebody.
Okay.
It wasn't like it was the town riding
Is-
roads.
You want it?
Yeah.
I appreciate the explanation. Thank you. No, that is the first I am hearing of that for the self-created definition. So we believe seeking the variance is the most feasible course of action, as they did acquire the home in this condition, and approaching the board would be the most feasible course of action as opposed to removing and relocating these items. And I would just like to mention there are a number of parcels in the surrounding area that have uniquely shaped lots, similar lot size that are all, around that half-acre mark, with 6-foot fences on secondary front yards. For example, 3 Cloverdale, 20 Cloverdale, 2 Woody Lane, and 40 Woody Lane have fencing close to the property line on secondary front yards. You want grants? I don't have records of those being grants from this board, just knowing that it is existing in the neighborhood as we've gone around and looked. So no known complaints from neighbors, and if the board has any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
I don't really see much of a reason to support the fence in its current location. There's no board grants, I can tell you that much with pretty good solid certainty. And it's, unlike the previous two we heard today, this is a over 22,000 square foot lot. Granted that it's a little bit of irregular shape, but it's not like they don't have a large backyard to work with, even if the fence was pushed back a bit.
Yeah, simply that, for the sake of the financial burden of having to relocate an entire fence, it was more feasible for the homeowner to seek permission from the board to maintain the fence that's been there for 20, plus years. Thank you. Good evening.
Application number 130-25, Brian and Teresa Prosek. Permission to erect second-story addition and one-story addition, leaving total side yards of 33.3 feet instead of required 36 feet, and to leave driveway on side property line not having required setback of 4 feet. Residence AA District, west side of Sylvan Avenue, 533 feet north of Montauk Highway, Bayport.
Good evening. I'm Michael Dunn, the architect for the Proseks at 256 Orinoco Drive, Brightwaters, New York, 11718.
Is this going to be self-created?
This is self-created, but we're not asking for a lot, and I will speak slowly. So they do plan on connecting their detached garage to the house and adding a second story to that garage. So that setback is more than the 18 feet. But the existing house on the north property line is only 15 feet away. So our combined setback is 33.3 instead of 36. So we're asking for a small variance for the setbacks.
Okay, planning, any comments?
No comment.
Does anyone else like to be heard in this matter? No, I'm going to take a motion, please.
Second.
Second, all in favor? Aye. Application's granted.
Thank you.
Application number 131-25, Christine Kiro. Permission to erect second-story addition, leaving rear yard of 17.1 feet instead of required 25 feet, and floor area ratio of 26% instead of permitted 25%. To leave shed having 13.4 feet behind the front line of the dwelling instead of required 20 feet. Above-ground pool having front yard of 2.1 feet, and pool deck having front yard of 10.24 feet instead of required 20 feet each, and rear yard of 3.54 feet instead of required 10 feet. Residence B District, southeast corner of Independence Avenue and Madison Street, West Islip.
So I'm the same Michael Dunn architect, and she will introduce, just tell your name and address.
Hi, Christine Cairo, 300 Independence Avenue, West Islip. I'm a little out of breath.
She went to town hall, so catching up. So we are proposing a second-story addition for extra bedrooms and bathroom upstairs. It is a unique lot. The existing rear yard now is 17 feet. So we were proposing to maintain that instead of the 25 feet. We were we got the blessing from the neighbors. We do have some letters and an okay from that rear neighbor that it would affect. Do you have letters?
I have 2 letters, and the other neighbor came to my house today and said she has no objection.
I do not have any precedence in that area that goes for that. I know it is a unique backyard. We just wanted to keep in line with what was there.
To speak to that, no, there is no grants for that, although they are selling themselves a little bit short here. The current existing rear yard is actually 12.7. That's on the left there. The part where they're putting the second story is currently at 17.7. So they're going straight up, but not over the entire first floor. So it's a small note. They actually have a less conforming rear yard currently. They just chose not to put the second story on that section of the house. And then beyond that, there's the whole matter of the pool and the pool deck, which planning is opposed to. 2 feet instead of required 20 is very significant. It was built, to the best that I can tell, within the past 5 years without permits. The deck is called out, which maybe the neighbor doesn't have an issue with it. They seem to believe they don't. It's 3.9 feet high, which so like 1 to 2 inches away from needing to be a main dwelling setback. They just skirt right under that, I guess fortunately for them. So if it was 0.1 feet higher, it would be, instead of required, 25.
I know we would be okay with removing the pool and making that deck comply to the setbacks.
I gave you the wrong thing. What happened? Oh, I gave you the wrong thing.
Yeah, here they are. That's it. And they didn't look.
Sorry, gave you the wrong thing.
Sure.
The existing is 17 instead of 25, yes?
So it's like a small kind of point here I was trying to make. The part where they're raising to a second story, well, raising is a weird word, is at 17.5, yes. They're going straight up. There's another part of the house that they're not putting a second story over that exists at 12.7. So their current rear yard is actually less conforming than where the second story is. They just chose not to build above that, probably wisely. Does that make sense to you?
That 1 story where it is 12 feet is a cathedral ceiling over the kitchen, and we did not want to affect that.
How did it get at 17 instead of 25? Is that by grant?
Not that I can tell, no.
This is a corner lot,
Yeah.
and presumably it was built at a time when the builder was allowed to pick which yard was going to be their front yard.
Oh, to say that differently.
Yeah. Depends on the company.
So that's all side by side.
So you could see this was meant to be a side yard initially, and the rear yard would be the yard to the east.
And what is on the other side? You're going which way? Where is the construction going to be? I can't tell. And what's the neighbor? Which neighbor is it?
That would be the neighbor to the south.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, so what were you saying about the pool?
We would have the pool removed. That is, we understand it's a big ask, and we would comply with the 10-foot if that's the right number for the decking.
I believe that's within the call of meeting, so yes.
Yeah, as a pool deck, because it's attached, but once it's no longer a pool deck, it should still be the right number.
I think it would be high enough that it would be, right? It's in between 18 and 48 inches, so I think that would be,
It should be enough.
I think so. I don't know that off the top of my head.
So we just strike in this portion.
Yeah. Yeah.
So regarding the pool, I'm going to make a motion that we strike from the call, above-ground pool having front yard of 2.1 feet.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. So that's been removed from the call.
Okay?
And the rest of the application? Planning, okay?
Okay, just to clarify really quick, yes, between 18 and 48 inches, it's a setback of 10 feet
Great.
for a roofless deck.
So we won't consider it a pool deck, it's just a deck.
All right, and then strike the word pool from in front of deck.
Second.
Second, all in favor? Aye. Is anyone else like to be heard in this matter? No? Okay, I'll take a motion then on the application.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll make a motion that we grant the application as amended.
Second, please. All in favor?
Aye.
Granted as amended.
Okay, thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Application number 132-25, Sylvia Sanchez. Permission to reconstruct dwelling, leaving front yard of 28.8 feet instead of required 40 feet, side yards of 10 feet and 13.7 feet instead of required 14 feet each, to erect second-story addition, leaving side yard of 13.9 feet instead of required 14 feet, roofed over porch, leaving front yard of 22.8 feet instead of required 40 feet, and side yard of 7.9 feet instead of required 14 feet, second-story deck with staircase, leaving side yard of 10.4 feet instead of required 14 feet, all having total side yards of 17.9 feet instead of required 28 feet, and floor area ratio of 29.9% instead of permitted 25%, and to install in-ground pool, leaving side yards of 10.4 feet and 13.6 feet instead of required 14 feet each, Residence A District, east side of North Windsor Avenue, 400 feet south of Montauk Drive, Bay Shore.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the applicant, Steve Bertolino, 130 West Main Street, East Islip, New York. I'm here on behalf of the applicant, but Thomas Bloor, the architect, had submitted the plans. It is my understanding that he's spoken to the secretary of the board, Mary Pissarro, earlier today, and that there needs to be an amendment. And I think, Mary, if you can help me out with this, what I was told was that the public notice and the call of the meeting were slightly off, and that we may need to amend the application so that the second-story addition will have a side yard of 10 feet and 13.7 feet, respectively, with a total side yard of 24.1 feet. Is that correct, Ms. Pissarro?
Yeah, that's correct, except for the fact that the public notice and the call of the meeting would never be different because it's pasted into different locations. So it was an oversight right from the beginning out of the building department that the second-story addition doesn't address the existing side yard of 10 feet. However, it's addressed in the first part of the call of the meeting, which is the reconstruction of the house. I'm not sure why they wrote it that way.
Right.
But so I would suggest that after to erect second-story addition, we add in leaving side yards, plural, of 10 feet and 13.9 feet instead of required 14 feet each.
All right, so we'll make a motion as, to the second-story addition as presented, 10 feet plus 13.9 feet.
Second.
Second, all in favor? Aye. So that's,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With that being said, this is an existing one-family dwelling that was constructed circa 1956 with a certificate of occupancy. There were several changes along the way over the years, and what the applicant is proposing to do now is reconstruct primarily the front part of the house because it's failing. So I'm told there's some structural issues, some foundational issues, and we're actually asking for the front yard setback that will be less of a relaxation from the code than exists today. We'll actually be going back about 7.9 feet from where it exists. Sure. Okay, so with the reconstruction, Mr. Wexler, we're adding the second floor to the rear of the house, or the rear two-thirds. As you heard Nick describing previously with an applicant just a moment ago, we're going straight up. So we're not asking for any side yard relaxations that don't already exist. I believe there are a lot of two-stories in the neighborhood, including the house next door. So that's what's being enlarged. We're also asking for what's known as a wraparound porch. So the existing front porch, again, will be less of a relaxation than exists today, but we're asking to see if we can go around the north side of the house down the side. In the rear yard, the original call of the meeting had asked for 2 setback relaxations on the swimming pool. I had advised Mr. Bloor and in turn the homeowner that this board would rather just see 1, so I'm not really sure which one the board would want, but they had 13.9. I said, why can't you just make that 14 feet? I was told because they were trying to keep the swimming pool in line with the house. So we're actually going to withdraw that one part of the application and only ask for 1 side yard setback of 10 foot instead of the 13.9. Beyond that, there's really not much being enlarged, but we are looking to add a second-story deck in the rear as well, with an ingress-egress staircase on the north side coming down, and that reduces the side yard relaxation, more than the house would. So the house generally is at 13.7, and that staircase would be at 10.7. That's what's being done. Should have been 13.9. That will comply on that side. I'm reading 13.9. It's the 4th line down. Oh, you're right. I apologize. Swimming pool 13.6 will comply to the 14. If the board saw fit to grant the 10.4 on the other side, which again it's a very small pool. It's a 14 by 26, and it would be in keeping in line with the house.
So there's a lot here, obviously. Trying to narrow it down, I suppose. The wraparound porch, that's just not supported. I don't know why we would allow them to just encroach into the side yard further on what's already a encroaching setback. Although I don't believe it's encroaching on that side, but I don't see why we would allow them to wrap around the porch there. Porches, it's often said, are permitted encroachments, but that's only in the front yard. That's never been the case in a side yard, so it's not something that we would support. The second-story deck, like many that come before this board, those are problematic when they have encroaching setbacks. Now, the deck itself would be in line with the house, but it is a new deck, or rather it's replacing an existing deck that has conforming setbacks. I believe that one is maybe going to demolish and then become a second-story deck. So both the staircase encroaching on the north side and the deck itself encroaching on the south side is, again, not supported. They could still fit a deck back there with completely conforming setbacks. There's not really much of a reason they shouldn't have to.
Right, you can have the deck, it's gotta be conforming.
Beyond that, I would agree with a lot of the things that he said. The front yard, it looks bad, but it actually is an improvement on the existing, and there's other situations in the neighborhood with non-conforming front yards. They already addressed the matter of the pool. It was a little silly to have a 13.6 request. It's already been resolved. That's good. And then the only other thing would be the second story, which, as they're saying, they are going straight up. It's not necessarily supported by previous board grants in the neighborhood. This is a somewhat difficult lot. It's 50 feet wide in Residence A. Now, whether or not that entitles them to this is a matter of dispute. I couldn't really say one way or the other. I could just say that it's not necessarily grants, and they are trying to stay within the current footprint of the building.
Nick, what does the nature and character of the neighborhood look like with respect to narrow lots and second stories? Are there a bunch of them? Or?
I would say no. I mean, you can see one over here. It's not completely abnormal, but most of these lots are larger. This is one of only seemingly relatively few longer, skinny lots in the Residence A. Or was it?
So it's not the nature and character of the neighborhood to have second story on 50-foot lots. That's what I'm trying to determine.
I mean, it would be hard to say it's nature and character when there's just not that many 50-foot wide lots in the first place.
Well, and if I could chime in, I would agree with the liaison from planning. Nick is right. I mean, the nature and character of the area doesn't have 50-foot lots, but it certainly does have a lot of two-story dwellings, and we're just looking to, stay in line and go straight up. with respect to the wraparound porch that planning has an issue with, my understanding is that we could withdraw that if the board, has an issue with it. We were hoping to get it. What I would ask, if you can look at the survey that you have in front of you, you can see the wraparound porch, my understanding was to kind of allow access to the rear yard. But perhaps if we could just get a staircase coming down on the north side of that front porch, that would be helpful so that we can actually get around to the back off of that front porch. As it's depicted on the survey, you can see the staircase is about 11 or 12 feet down the lot line. If we were allowed to have that staircase encroaching, it would be a great concession on our part, and I think a de minimis intrusion on the side lot.
Nick, can I ask you a question? Going back to nature character, this is a 50-foot lot. What are the widths of the lots surrounding it? Generally, are they 75, 100? I mean, it's problematic if you have a property that's, I'm giving a gainsay, half the width of the others, and say treat me the same as the others. I don't think that, in my mind, flies. But if the others are similarly situated, maybe they're 60s, but if they're 75s and 100s, I don't think the compromise lot gets treated the same. Let's just see what you can tell.
I have to measure it out really quick, but, or figure it out, sorry.
I mean, I'm looking at it, it looks like it's considerably narrower than the rest.
I think the only one that might be comparable would be across the street. From the screen I can see, across the street to the left might be about 200 feet away to the west, almost there.
So for instance, the property right north, which seems to be most of the other ones along North Windsor Cinema, those are 100 feet wide.
So, obviously, nature and character is one of the tests that we use, and certainly the benefit to the applicant, and of course, you have the environmental concerns, which I don't think there are any. With respect to this application, it is a lot, but we are staying within the FAR that normally this board would grant in any zone, as the FAR is 25%. The board generally grants up to 30% in most instances, and if we were taking out the wraparound porch, we're only at 29.79. So I do think there needs to be parity, even though we may not have an exact nature and character argument. The parity argument is if this board is regularly giving relaxations of FAR to 30% or just below, and we fall into that category, I don't think that the small lot that the applicant has, should not entitle them to the same relief that the board grants to someone with a 100-foot lot. Oh, well, I didn't know where you were going with, yeah. Well, I didn't know where you were going with that. Yeah. So Mr. Wexler, is the issue the second-story addition? Is it the wraparound porch? No, because, in all sincerity, the second-story addition is the primary reason we're here. And obviously, all we're doing is replacing the front porch with a better front porch that is more compliant. We're replacing a rear deck that is non-compliant, that is about 4 feet or 3 feet off the lot line, with one that's 10.4 feet off the lot line. I understand the second-story deck might be a little intrusive, and if we had to forego that second-story deck, so be it. But I think, taking away a deck entirely and saying, well, you can comply, you're giving them a deck that's not necessarily, any use or of limited use. And that's where the benefit to the applicant clearly would outweigh any detriment. We are staying in line with the house. We're not, going further out than the existing lot line in any of the requests.
To reiterate really quick, planning's chief concerns are with the second-story deck and the wraparound porch. The second-story addition is noteworthy, but it's not something I'm necessarily opposed to. believe it's almost 14 on the one side and 10 on the other instead of 14. It's not so significant.
It's doable.
I think so.
Well, may I ask, how does planning feel about a little staircase on the north side of that front porch?
I'm not sure I understand the need. I'm just looking at the survey. It looks like there's already is a couple of steps down there.
Yeah, that's in the front. We're trying to get to the back.
I'm not sure that that would require a variance. The variance comes in when there's a roof over it.
Yeah, so that would just, if we took that porch and cut the roof at the property line, at the structure line of the house, and had 3 steps down, then perhaps we'd be compliant.
I think so, but I'm not certain. But the roof over is what causes
It's what's creating
the
it.
setback.
I'll speak to the architect about redesigning that if we can.
Yeah.
So it sounds like perhaps I should withdraw the part of the application for the wraparound porch as well as the second-story deck and staircase. And, you know, if that's something that the board would consider, like I said, that does keep us under the FAR.
Reading the room.
Well, you gave me a lot of hints.
We could try it.
Some people don't pick up on it, Brooklino. Okay, go ahead.
Is there anyone else who would like to be heard in this application? Perfect.
Okay. Good evening.
Good.
My name is Todd Joyce, reside at 1306 North Windsor Avenue, Bay Shore across the street. He mentioned, obviously I'm not big with words, but I will mention that he said the property is obviously small, and the driveway is only 3 cars deep. There's 2 parked cars across the street in front of another neighbor's house. There's usually another 2 cars parked on the east side, north of the house, and then usually 1 blocking the fire hydrant, or 3 cars going east-west with another car facing north and south. We all know that January 30th, there was a huge fire on North Windsor, about 3 blocks north of this. There's also a lot of volunteer firemen that live north of us that use this route to get through to the firehouse. With all the cars parked, it makes the road very narrow. It's very not safe. Blocking a car in front of a hydrant is not safe. You know, a lot of this, you could see, maybe he was pointing to the house or the lot that was west. That's on a cul-de-sac. So obviously you could park as many cars as you want on a cul-de-sac. Just wrap it around. Here, when you have a house about, 30 feet north of Sunrise Highway, the service road, multiple cars coming on and off. We all know that there's a lot of people driving fast. There's been numerous accidents. You know, I just see that obviously the house is too small for the occupants that are in there now. If they have 7 cars, if we go up higher, how many more people, how many more cars? I don't know if there's a law or the town has signs that need to be put up, how close you can park towards Sunrise Highway. I don't know all that. I just own the house. I've been there for 17 years. And since the new owners have moved in, it's just gotten worse. There used to just be an older couple and 2 cars. I know when they went to sell the house, they actually had to make a third of the driveway. They put like 4x4 posts and then put mulch on it because he said that he needed a front lawn. I don't know the law, but that's what he needed and told me to sell the house. So I don't know if that's still needed or whatever the case maybe is, but I know that it's definitely a safety concern with all the cars parked in the street. There's kids playing, cars are coming off of Sunrise Service Road very fast heading north. I don't ask you to take your work home, but if you drive by and you look right and you look north, you'll be like, wow. Even when the cops come, when there's accidents, they've checked the cars, make sure they're all registered correct, and he's even said, this is a safety concern, especially if you have fire trucks or any ambulance or any service. But how many people can live in one house? Well, that's subject to town code. Well, fire code. Yeah. I mean, that is by square footage. We don't control that. Right. So that house is adequate to how many people? Is it 1-bedroom house? Is it a 5-bedroom house? Is it a 2? Are we going to 9 bedrooms? I'm just asking. I don't know. That's the building department. That has to do with the fire safety code. Right. That's not something that we concern about. Okay. I'm not asking you, I'm just mentioning that blocking a fire hydrant is a safety concern. Parking cars on either side, making it narrow, is a safety concern. How would the building go? How would all the construction go? Where would all the workers park their cars? I don't want them in my driveway. I'm sure if your neighbor was building, you wouldn't want them in your driveway. That's why they're neighbors, not friends. Yeah. I just hope you look at it as a huge safety concern. More cars, more building, you know, where are you going to go with it? Thank you.
I'm going to make a motion that we deny so much of the application seeking the wraparound porch and the second floor deck and grant remaining. And deny one side of 13.6 and grant remaining.
Understood. Yeah, if Mr. Bloor is not watching, well, I'll certainly let him know. Okay, thank you. Have a good evening.
Two applications, because I believe we're going to have a request for an adjournment. So we're jumping ahead to application number 135-25, SRMV Realty Corp. Permission to install mezzanine addition resulting in floor area ratio of 39.97% instead of permitted 35%. Industrial 1 District, south side of Carlo Road, 330 feet east of Johnson Avenue, Bayport. It says Bayport, but we have to correct that. It's actually Bohemia.
Correct.
Is there anyone else who want to be heard on that application? Anyone here for that application? All right, so I'll take a motion to adjourn, please.
Motion.
Do we need a date?
You're going to open adjourn, right?
Yeah.
Okay, open adjournment. We get a second, all in favor? Aye. Madam
All right,
adjourned.
great, thank you. It's Guy W. Germano, 4250 Veterans Memorial Highway. Okay, thank you.
Just so you know, I'm abstaining, refusing from that vote.
Okay, thank you, Guy.
He's very impressed by that, Chris.
Yeah. Application number 133-25, Gladys Guardardo and Santos Rios. Permission to leave roofed-over porch having front yard of 31.1 feet instead of required 34 feet, and side yard of 14.9 feet instead of required 18 feet. 5.6-foot fence atop an 18-inch wall, and 6-foot columns on front property line not having required setback of 15 feet. Residence AA District, north side of Pinewood Avenue, 402.7 feet west of Connecticut Avenue, Central Islip.
Yeah, my name is Gladys Guardado, 219 Pinewood Avenue, Central Islip.
My name is Santos Ruiz, 219 Pinewood Avenue, Central Islip, 11722, New York.
Okay, so this application, two things. Well, there's only two things on the call of the meeting, really. With regards to the roof over porch, it's sort of like a gazebo at the end of the porch that is encroaching into the side yard and the front yard setback there. I think the rest of the porch actually does conform. Now, from what I can tell, they were told that this was going to be something that they would need a variance for when they filed for the building permit, but I believe it was already constructed before the permit was issued. I'm not really sure why they did it that way. So it's really just a matter of whether or not the board would have granted it prior to construction or not. But it is only in that one area, I believe. With regards to the fence, the wall, and the columns in the front property line, I don't really see any reason why it should be granted. This is the primary front. It's not like it's a secondary front or anything that might have some kind of strange exceptions. And it was just sort of put there relatively recently, I believe. Again, I think within the past year or two. Sorry? Yeah, and also we do have a fairly up-to-date street view, actually. It was when it's before the fence went up exactly. You can see it's starting to be constructed there. You want me to bring it back up, probably?
Yeah.
That's an issue. What do you want to do? Oh. What am I supposed to do, take it down?
If it were no higher than 4 feet, it would be fine.
Oh, okay, so you want me to drop it down, 2 feet?
It's no way that we can leave it down, because I have dogs, and, you know, it's people walking by, and I don't want the dog to jump over the fence. That's why I did it that way. But you can see, though, you can see inside. It's not like a closed fence. Like you can see whatever's going on inside.
So you want 4 feet?
You want, it's
All
nothing
right.
that we can do?
All right.
Yeah,
I'll do that.
It's not gonna help.
Is anyone else would like to be heard in this matter? Anything else? Take a motion then, guys.
Motion to deny the fence and to grant the balance of the application.
What about the column?
Right, we'll go 4 feet.
And the 6-foot columns are being denied as well.
All right. So you deny do you deny the
Wait, the kiosk? No.
the kiosk?
The porch is good.
The porch is good, okay.
Uh,
So it's only the fence?
The fence and the brick columns.
The brick
On-
columns.
Outside the fence, not in front of the house.
Yeah, the brick columns is the fence, or the
Yeah.
fence, so I just have to lower it down
Yeah.
a little bit.
Yeah.
It has to go down or back. Once it's over 4
Well,
feet,
if I put it back, that
No,
can
you
stay.
can't wait no more.
No, I need to.
once it's over 4 feet high, it requires a 15-foot setback from your property line, not from the
Well,
street.
if I go back a little bit, then I can leave the same 6 feet or no?
If you go back 15 feet.
No, it's
There's
better.
no way?
We want to drop it off to 4 feet.
Okay, well, that's your call.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Application number 134-25, John Douse, permission to establish accessory apartment pursuant to Islip Town Code Section 68-602, and to erect one-story addition leaving front yard of 30.5 feet instead of required 40 feet, and driveway having side yard of 3 feet instead of required 4 feet. Residence A District, east side of Hyman Avenue, 420 feet north of Abbott Place, Bay Shore.
Good evening. Richard Bronchick, Bronchick, for JL Drafting, 707 Route 110, Farmingdale. Good evening. Okay, we're requesting permission to erect a one-story addition, leaving a front yard setback of 30.5 feet instead of the required 40 feet. This is the same request made by the current homeowner, which was denied by this board by decision dated November 9, 1999, case number 437-99. The board has now consented to this rehearing. The reason for our request is that subsequent to the 99 decision, the board, by decision dated July 22, 2021, case number 435-21, granted the exact same front yard relaxation for the property located directly across the street. I have copies of those two decisions, if I could present it to the board, if that's... You have them already? Okay, great.
So you have that one grant, which I'm not aware of. Are there any other grants?
Not to my knowledge, just the one right across the street. It's for the exact same setback. Yes.
We're good with, what is the nature and character of the neighborhood? We'll find out from Nick. Are all the other homes 40 feet?
They're not all 40 feet. It's a combination. And so briefly, basically, we're asking for the same relief that was granted by the board 3 or 4 years ago to the property across the street.
You want to address the apartment?
Sure. The apartment, it's a one-bedroom, first-floor apartment, 640 square feet, and we satisfied the requirements so far. We'd like it to be approved. And there's also a driveway issue, just to be upfront, there's also a driveway issue that we're asking for a 1-foot relaxation.
Me? Okay. So that was actually a fairly good synopsis of the history here. It was denied for exactly what's being asked, and then right across the street, somebody asked for an identical setback of 30.5 that was granted about 4 years ago.
Any rationale for that grant?
Not that was written into the decision.
Who was on the board at that time?
You were. You seconded the motion. So it's not just that, to be fair to them. There are a few others. There's a front yard of 35.4. That's not 30.5, granted. There's another one at 28. That's fairly far away, about 2 blocks over, but within the 500-foot range. I wouldn't say that it's a very overwhelming amount of precedent, but it's pretty hard to get past that an identical grant was given across the street. It was a one-story addition on what was otherwise a conforming front yard. The only other thing I can really say is, and I'm not an architect, so this is not my area of expertise, but this being a split level, I think that's why they want to put this in the front yard, because they don't really have a very good way of doing a rear addition without doing a pretty substantial reconstruction of their existing house. So as far as there's being an alternative to expanding, it's probably a bit difficult for them to do so. I don't know if they could speak to that. Again, I'm not an architect, but I think that's probably why they want to put it in the front.
Exactly, because they want to expand the kitchen, because the kitchen's very small, and the kitchen's in the front of the house. It would take a major renovation to do exactly what you said.
Does anyone else like to hear this matter?
Also have a letter from a neighbor, if that helps. If we could. And we have photos of the house across the street. Thank you. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, how close are we getting at 8 o'clock when Chris has to leave? All right, we're good. Application number 136-25, Catherine Shield, permission to elevate non-conforming cabana pursuant to section 68-415A, leaving front yard of 16 feet instead of required 50 feet, side yards of 1.3 feet and 0.2 feet instead of required 25 feet each, total side yards of 1.5 feet instead of required 60 feet, and rear yard of 14.3 feet instead of required 40 feet. To erect roofed-over entrance platform, leaving front yard of 12.5 feet instead of required 50 feet, and side yards of 7.4 feet and 6.5 feet instead of required 25 feet each, and roofed-over deck, leaving side yards of 2.4 feet and 1.1 feet instead of required 25 feet each, and rear yard of 9.3 feet instead of required 40 feet, all having floor area ratio of 60.09% instead of permitted 25%. Residence AAA District, south side of East Lane, 48.2 feet west of Snedeker Avenue, Bayport.
Hi, my name is Maria Matisse. I'm representing Catherine Shield. Do you need any other information from me?
Sorry, I can hardly hear you.
Sorry. My name is Maria Matisse. I'm representing Catherine Shield.
Okay.
Was there any other personal information you need from me, or?
Your address?
I'm sorry?
Your address?
I'm working under DK Architectural Design. Their address is under P.O. Box 250 in Yaphank, New York, 11980.
Okay, thank you.
Are you the architect on this case, or?
No, I'm the filing representative.
I'm sorry?
The filing representative.
Okay, thank you.
So what we're really looking to do is to raise the existing cabana. The whole reason to do that is because during like a bad storm, the water goes up to the foundation of the cabana, which is really damaging. And in the case of a really bad storm, we don't want the structure of the cabana to really be damaging to other surrounding properties and it just be taken away by the water. Mm-hmm. So all the neighbors really have the same condition where they're just cabanas on the property, and they're all about the same size, if not bigger than ours. Mm-hmm.
In granting the application. The nonconformity has been an issue for over 20 years.
Yeah, I'm
The
sure.
use of the cabana, not being a single-family dwelling, and it's.
As a
like-
cabana, yeah.
Right. So why do you think it's being elevated to a dwelling height if it's only a cabana?
They were really afraid of it being, like I said, washed away. So they're trying to go as, I guess, not really as high as they can, but just at a level that the architect thought would be safe.
Can I just read this one into the record? I think it's noteworthy. At that time, the vice chairman was Mr. Messina, now Saria Messina, made the following motion, quote, "Mr. Chairman, without condoning whatever the living situation is, and without passing judgment on it, although it would be caution to the applicant because you are not, as I understand it, permitted to reside full-time in that beach cabana. The relief before us is strictly area variance relief, and with respect to that, we would grant the application." So back then, when was this, 2019? Mr. Judge Messina was concerned that it was going to be used for full-time use, and that seems, could be where we're headed.
Well, if you look at the floor plan, the first floor plan on the second sheet, there's really nothing in there but an open space and an existing bar area. So there's no plumbing, there's no nothing going to the home to actually make it a living space.
They've got no plumbing, correct?
No, there's just an existing counter, existing bar. To my understanding, it's really just, it's all open. It's an open room.
Is the bar a bar sink? Usually that's referred to.
Looking at the plans, it just says an existing counter, an existing bar. I don't see any notation of a sink.
Okay.
So it just looks like an open room with a counter space.
And it's not their intention then to reside there?
No.
Other cabanas that they were similar in size, are they also raised? This is massive.
Well, their property is also, like our property, is a bit lower than theirs. The two neighboring properties are higher up, and they have like a bulkhead going on either side.
So this is a property with as you've already found out, a bit of a history. It established non-conforming use as a cabana without a principal structure on the site in 2000. You already know the 2019 case. There's also a 2003 case where they tried to raise this cabana on poles and have it sort of be counted as a bathhouse. Now, at the time, in that decision, as part of the denial, it was the board's opinion that if they were to raise this structure, effectively altering a non-conforming use, that it would lose its non-conforming status. And then all of these other variances would come up and become problematic to the point where it couldn't possibly be granted. Now, that's important here because we have a similar situation. I don't know exactly what goes on in this structure, but I think the most important part of the call of the meeting, without knowing the specifics of what does or doesn't go on there, is permission to elevate non-conforming cabana, just the very first line there. It doesn't say how much is being altered, but it's the department's position that by raising it, the entire cabana is in effect being altered, reconstructed, which means we're looking at over 100% alteration to a non-conforming structure and a non-conforming use, which is well beyond what could reasonably be considered normal maintenance and repair of your non-conforming structure. I don't believe it could possibly be supported under those circumstances.
And we would allow, the code allows up to 25%.
25% is what's written down. Yeah.
Yeah, we have to.
Yeah, as a special exception, and then you can go beyond that as a variance, but it gets a little complicated. But the main point here is that it's a significant alteration to a currently non-conforming thing, and it's the point for these non-conforming uses to eventually be phased out over time. This kind of reconstruction, while admirable, you're trying to keep your structure safe, is exactly the kind of thing that will prolong this structure in this location when it's our intention to eventually phase it out entirely.
Well, like you said, it's not an entire reconstruction. We're really just raising the existing structure because we don't want anything to happen to it. The owner obviously wants to keep it there, just like all the other existing cabanas. We're just trying to have it there as safely as possible.
The issue is, by town code, the raising is considered an alteration, even if the cabana itself is not changing. It's a similar situation even when somebody's raising their house, all of their setbacks gets called back up because it's considered an alteration of the entire structure. It's all being raised up. So as far as town code is concerned with regards to the nonconformity, this isn't even mentioning the front and back decks that are being added on. The entire thing is considered to be altered in this circumstance based on town code. And that's the interpretation from the department and zoning.
The front and rear porches were really just added on because we needed stairs to go up to the raised cabana.
Right,
so I know
because you're
that
raising
was-
it.
Yeah. So,
But
I guess.
But you lose your non-conforming status when you do a 100% enlargement. That's the problem.
that was the opinion of the board at the time, to be clear.
My name is Bob Wolney. I'm 15 Lighter Drive, Wisconsin, New York. Our family owns the cabana to the east of this one. And I just have questions on it as far as it says to elevate it, but it doesn't say how high. It's saying everything about side yards, front yards, whatever, but, are we going to be looking at a structure that's 12 feet in the air? I don't understand, how high they're raising it and how they're going to raise it. Are they going to have to come onto our property to do so? None of this has been discussed with any of us. We just basically got the letter in the mail. So those are really my concerns on it. They're all little summer cabanas down there. It's just, nobody stays, in there all the time. It's just we go down there for the summer and you hang out but my concern is what is it going to do to the properties on either side of it, or, how high is it going? Does it say in the thing how high it's going?
So according to the plans, it would be 22 feet, 8 1/4 inches
To the ridge?
to the ridge.
That's the top of the house.
It's the top of the house.
Not a house cabana.
Do we know what it is now? Or? You're right, the top of the cabana. I'm
I
sorry.
do not know that off the top of my head, I'm sorry.
So it's probably going about 8 additional feet in the air.
8 feet
There's
in the
about
air?
12 steps to get up, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, 12 steps to get to the first floor? Ground floor?
There's 8 and then the landing, so about 9 in the front.
There seems to be an intention to raise it to FEMA standards for what would be a house, only this is not technically a house, so
Right.
there's no requirement from FEMA to do so. So they don't get any of those exceptions that may have been in the code.
Right, only because 9 feet is, if you're raising that 9 feet from the ground from where it is now, it's going to be very high for us. If we look to the west, that's all you're going to see basically is this house. So that was my concern, was how high it was going, and if you're raising it 9 feet off the ground, that's,
Well, it's about 9 steps.
9
So 9
steps.
steps of probably 8 inches each?
It looks about, it's going to be 8 feet from the top of the first floor to the grade,
Oh,
looking at the section and the elevations.
because I don't know that either house on either side is, that high in the air.
I don't think they are, right? I was going to ask you that, actually.
Yeah.
How many have elevators?
Ours is on, I would say probably when I'm standing at the beach, it's probably shoulder height at the beach, but then it's street level, at the front of the house. So the sand, sand goes down on the angle.
So after Superstorm Sandy, how many of the cabanas elevated?
None. Ours has been existing for, I don't even know how long we have it, 30 years in the family. So, and that was pre-existing when we bought it. It was already up off the sand.
Well, that's yours, but any of the others?
There was one, but I believe it's actually a house. It's on the very end of Connecticut, and it's raised. It was on one of the shows. They redid it, and it's
on the east
raised.
side of the Snedeker?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a house.
yeah, that's actually a house.
So
But
a
all the other
house-
cabanas that I know that are there, I don't think any of them were raised.
Ma'am, if you want to speak, you have to come up.
So a house is required.
So the house on the other side east side of Connecticut, right on the corner, right on the water, that one was raised up like 12 feet.
No. It's
No.
at the terminus.
Right,
It's bayfront.
it's right on the bay.
It's got a white wall around it.
Oh, that.
Yeah, right
That
there.
one. Yep.
Yeah, that one.
That's actually a dwelling. I believe they have full plumbing, the whole deal in that house.
Yes, it is a dwelling.
But all the other ones to the west of it and us, as far as I know, none of them were raised. They've been that way for 30 years.
So after Superstorm Sandy, there was an executive order of the town board, and this board will remember that homes with COs, dwellings, where
Right.
people live
Right.
with COs, were permitted to elevate without variances, even if they had substandard lots or non-conforming side yards, as long as they were CO'd. Because
Right.
obviously it was to protect their property, protect their investments in their single-family home. This is different for a lot of reasons.
But that's assuming it's a conforming, like you say, a conforming dwelling.
A dwelling, right.
Right.
This is the distinction.
This is not
that
a dwelling.
This is an accessory structure.
Right.
Okay. Other side of us is.
Ma'am, if you could just give us your name and address if you're going to speak. Mama Bear?
Yeah, but they didn't raise it.
Excuse me?
Guys, hello.
If you could give us your name and address, please?
I'm sorry, yes. I'm sorry. My name is Terry Lynn Woolney. I also reside at 15 Ladder Drive, Nesconset, New York. Our cabana has been in my family for 30 years. As far as anybody living there, that's not the case. We are just summer homes. We go down there for the weekend, or if anybody's off during the week, and just kind of hang out and have fun.
So are you for or against this application?
Oh, we just wanted to know how high they were going. That's why we're here. If it's not too high and crazy, then I have no problem with it. But, from the letter, we just didn't understand how high they were going.
Interesting. What do you think?
All right, so we'll ask the applicant again what the height is. All right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
So if you could at least address the height
Sure.
that you're proposing.
So in the front elevation, it's saying plus or minus 4 feet 5 inches. And let me see what it says in the rear. Yep, so the proposed front north elevation, right where the left side of the structure is, you'll see a 4 foot 5 dimension. And let me see. It would be 5 feet 5 inches because the elevation grade drops 1 foot there.
Yeah, I'm not in objection to that. I just interested in how they're going to do it, because there's not a lot of room on the street, and obviously the backyard is the bay. So I don't know if they have to encroach on our property, if they have to get our permission to do that first. So, okay, just want to make sure. All right, other than that, I'm fine. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I just missed that. What did you say? Yeah. Okay. Okay, no problem. Okay, so it's not like something at the next meeting, we'll just hear back from you guys at some point? Yeah, so it's not like it's moved to the next meeting, we'll just hear back from the ZBA at some point? Okay, thank you guys so much.
Application number 137-25, Cypress Ave LLC, permission to erect two-story dwelling on lot having area of 5,000 square feet instead of required 7,500 square feet, width of 50 feet instead of required 75 feet, leaving side yards of 11.9 feet and 12.6 feet instead of required 14 feet each, total side yards of 24.5 feet instead of required 28 feet, and floor area ratio of 42.4% instead of permitted 25%. Residence B District, west side of Cypress Avenue, 200 feet south of Wood Street, Brentwood.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is John Armentano. I'm an attorney with Farrell Fritz, representing the applicant, Cypress Avenue LLC. I also have with me the principal, Ed LaCalzi, to my right, and the real estate expert, Paul Dykes, who has also submitted a report. This matter has been reopened by this board. I have a packet here to discuss with you. We're operating under a provision. There was a prior denial of this application, but we sought to have this matter reheard, which was granted by this board, and we appreciate that. Well, the code has changed. Yes. So at the time it was decided in 1991, it was denied under the former decision of Dick Shire, who rendered that decision. Subsequent to that, there has been an amendment to the code, section 68-20.1, which is entitled Separately Owned Lots. And in that code section, let me just pull it up quickly, it reads that, I think that's, upon proof satisfaction to the Board of Appeals after, I'm sorry, a structure or addition which is intended to contain a permitted use may be erected on any lot separately owned at the time of its rezoning to its current zoning district, which does not meet the width and area requirements for said district. Correct, and again, this is operating under the single and separate provision of the code. Well, I wanted to amend the call of the meeting because as was submitted in conversations with the planning department and has been submitted to the planning department, Exhibit 6 in the booklet has a reduction so that we are there's no FAR exceedance, we are at 25.25, and the side yards have also been met, and that's Exhibit 6 in this application. So the issue is really the application of the code section, which speaks to a pre-existing non-conforming lot, which this lot is and was, and I can take you through that history. So again, just to be clear for the record and for the call of the meeting, we're only requesting the designation of a single and separate property which meets the requirements of this code. The proposed application does not seek any FAR exceedances. It's at 0.25, and it is also meeting all the setbacks, and that is depicted as Exhibit 6 in our material. Well, we could talk a little bit more about that. Correct, yes, that's fine, yes, of course, that's right, we will not be requesting that. So in essence, when this property was part of a subdivision in 1933, that exhibit is let me just catch this one. Exhibit 4, which shows the subdivision map. It was adopted in 1930. We have highlighted the two lots. It is a 50 by 100 lot in this vicinity. The code at that time permitted, let me just get this information. Mm-hmm. Well, this ties back into the pre-existing non-conforming status and this code section. The code, when it was adopted in 1928, for this Residence B required only 3,600 square feet with a lot width of 40. This was subdivided in 1935.
Zoning in this part of the town in 1928. We generally use, there was definitely zoning in the downtowns, downtown Islip, downtown Bayshore, but I'm not sure there was zoning in this area near Suffolk Avenue and Brentwood. We generally use 3738 as the year after which there was zoning throughout the entire town. So that's the date we use to predate. But I'm not sure that that's relevant. I'm just saying you're citing the code that I'm not sure applied to this property.
Yeah, what is the relevance of 1927? What's today's code calls for 7,500.
Correct, but this lot, correct. And I just think, to your point, Mary, from what's online that we pulled, the code does have a section that called for Residence B.
Yeah, we had a code. We certainly had a code in 1928.
But that's not the code we're dealing with today.
Well, if I could just clarify, it was only in the downtowns. I'm not certain it existed in Suffolk Avenue. Maybe the modern times, maybe downtown Brentwood, but I'm not sure there would have been zoning here. I think what you're trying to do is, because the map was filed in 1933, you're going to the code before 1933, but just by filing in 33, you've already predated 3738, which is the number that we usually use.
And that's fine, so that kind of closes the loop on that. So the prior code permitted this to be a permitted use, and that is exactly what the code section speaks to, that provides you the single and separate status. So regardless of what the upzone was to 7,000, this site has been held in single and separate, and that has been authenticated by.
So he's making a single and separate argument. He's saying that it existed in this configuration since prior to the code, which then prevented it.
Yeah, I would like to intercede here if Mr. Amertano will let me.
Sure.
He would.
Go get it.
Sure. There is a bit of a dispute here, and this is going to be pretty complicated, so bear with me here. With regards to whether this is singular separate, department's of the opinion that the code did not meaningfully change here, where this would be now designated as single and separate. The code section being referenced did already exist in town code. It was just moved into the non-conforming section. But more importantly, the other part here, which is why this was denied in 1991, is in Residence B, which it's still there, about separate ownership. And I'll spare doing the entire reading of it, but the last part here is the most important part. So this is both for lot area and lot width. And in the end says, adjoining property conforms to the area density requirements of the amended zone prior to any such amendment, which is what they are establishing, and conforms to all other minimum requirements of this ordinance. So the argument that was made in the original denial was that you can have single and separate to make an as-of-right claim with either area or width, but not both at the same time, because at that point you're not complying with all other requirements of the code. So, and this is sort of the confusing part here, planning disputes the fact that the code has changed in such a way where they are now classified under town code as single and separate. However, all that means is that then they are subject to the 5 factors as opposed to having an as of right, which we are not necessarily opposed to. So I'm opposed to his logic, but not necessarily the application otherwise.
Now I'm confused.
You should be.
So in 1992, are you prepared to discuss the Kranstuber case? Probably not.
Yes, no, I'm aware of
Okay.
the precedent that was set by Mr. Shire's zoning board of appeals.
Yeah, it was
Yes.
New York State Court of Appeals. Yeah.
Yeah, correct. I'm aware of those decisions which reference this particular section of the code.
Yes, that was the long-time interpretation of.
Right. Kranstuber gives you one exception.
And that's basically what was being referenced in that even decision among others, Dittmer versus Shire, Kranstuber versus Shire. That was all in denial, which again, planning agrees that that has not changed. They are not entitled. But where that then leads them to is not necessarily that they are just not allowed to do it whatsoever. It just goes then to based on the 5 factors and whether or not this is an area variance the board is going to grant, as opposed to them being as of right.
Right.
Which
That's
again,
kind of what I
planning
said
is
at
not
the beginning.
necessarily
It gives you
opposed
the-
to this.
That's what first thing I said is it gives you the right to come in. However, it then falls to us to our discretion.
No, I understand that, and I appreciate Nick's position. The amendment to the code, which brings up this section, was amended in 2010. So while we may dispute, there is an existence of the prior sections which were referenced. I'm just saying there's a conflict. If you read the code sections of 113 and 111, when you read it, it says you can have but one, which is an interpretation that was given by the court, so I'm not going to question that. But then if you turn to the single and separate, it combines the two, that it says you must meet the width and area. But that court decision was referencing specifically the sections 111 and 113 under those were the decisions. It's the
Which 111 and 113 are still in effect. Those are the Residence B ones.
I understand that. I know I've read those cases as well. That's correct. I think if you would agree with me, you may not. Those decisions that you're referencing were specific to applications that were seeking relief under 68-111 and 68-113. There was no reference to 68-20.1. I'm not sure. It seems to have, it's not in the decision. It was not the relief that was sought previously. So those decisions did not interpret 68-20.1, which speaks to the situation at hand where it does say lot width and lot area. So there's a conflict in the code, and for lack of a better word, that ambiguity falls to the applicant. There's also Court of Appeals law there as well. These provisions in the code do not read. And that being said, I can speak more to other aspects of this application. 42.4.
To clarify, that's, I believe they've, yeah, at this point, we're only considering the lot area and the lot width.
It is correct, yes. Well, this was an older subdivision, correct? Yes. You can look at this diagram here. I have also included in my packet material, there are at least 3 that I've included that are, you have 44 Park Avenue, which is Exhibit 9. Well, actually, Exhibit 9 shows you the 3 that I'm referencing, which are the 3 50 by 100 lots in the immediate vicinity of the subject property. The first one being 44 Park Avenue. That is correct. And at the end of Exhibit 10, there is a structure that was built on a 50 by 100 lot. So that was constructed in 1970. Exhibit 11 is 44 Park Avenue, directly across the street. Same situation, similar construction on a 50 by 100. And then Exhibit 12 is 32 Cypress Avenue in Brentwood, which was constructed at the same time, but then did receive a variance from this board to allow for the maintenance of an overhanging porch with significant, so this lot was reviewed by this board and granted a variance 754 of 06 to allow the maintenance of a covered porch, et cetera. So this lot was actually reviewed by this board and approved in the configuration. They are, correct. They were permits issued, these were just, the 2 of them were building permits issued in 1970. So the homes were constructed in 1970.
Single and separate battle didn't really begin until the late 70s or into the 80s.
Right, so how many grants are there, I guess is what I'm...
Well, the only grant that I see is 32 Cypress Avenue, which was a existing home that came before this board to maintain additions that were added. So the board did not grant per se the 50 by 100 approval, but it did appear before this board and was allowed to remain. You have a clear grandfathering status there because it was constructed. But in terms of considering the character of the area, again, and I can have our appraiser speak to this, this is the last remaining lot in the area that has not been constructed. It serves no other purpose than for residential development. There has been no offering of purchase from anyone else that is completely, is valueless unless it is constructed upon. And the issue here is there's not going to be a detrimental change to the character of the community. There's not going to be a negative impact to the home values in the community. This would be effectively creating an affordable site for an affordable home to be built in an area of the town that could use a little bit of affordable housing. So the benefits to the community here would be construction of a residential home rather than the remaining of a vacant lot that has fallen into, it's basically unusable unless this board will grant us either the variance or the status of single and separate. I don't know if you want to hear from a real estate expert. I did bring him for a reason, just to briefly discuss the application. You can just speak very briefly, if you can.
Paul Dykes, 223 Wall Street, Huntington. Excuse me. Good evening. The subject property is situated on the west side of Cypress Avenue, north of Suffolk Avenue, and west of Wicks Road in the Brentwood community. Subject is a vacant site situated in a residential neighborhood within a Residence B zone, bordered by residential uses to the north, south, and across the street to the east. The applicant is seeking relief in the zoning code to develop subject lot with a two-story dwelling on a 5,000 square foot lot. There are 3 sites which were provided, which are in the report that I submitted. As council alluded to, 32 Cypress, 45 Park Avenue, and 44 Park Avenue, all containing 5,000 square foot lots and built with single-family homes. So in my review of the site and the overall character of the surrounding neighborhood, they are one-story homes, to my knowledge, yes.
Sorry, but I think it's more of a legal question. The issue is the FAR we are compliant with. The relativity of height is irrelevant. The FAR is the cubic volume of the house. We are compliant with the current code at 0.25. The homes on the smaller lots are one story. I don't think that should be taken into too much consideration when considering that in order to provide a 3-bedroom home of certain value in the community, the applicant has proposed a 2-story modest home for that. And I'm not sure the character of the community will be altered as a majority of the homes in the vicinity are 2-story homes. If you're understand what you're saying, but the issue is if you were to grant us a zoning compliant FAR site, zoning compliant FAR would be as of right permitted. I'm not sure that the homes that exist, they may be pre-existing non-conforming and cannot be altered, so there may not be that triggering effect. So if these single-story homes were to seek a variance, but they are non-conforming in other respects, it would not be allowed to expand. We are merely seeking to maintain the FAR of 0.25. I don't know off the top of my head. You may be accurate. This is a dense area. This is not going to alter that density whatsoever. It is actually pacing a dormant lot into some type of habitable, usable space as it has remained undeveloped for decades. So I'm not sure what the triggering or the change, the character of the community is somewhat dense housing, and this would be completing the process. This is the only lot left in the area to be developed.
In my, in my review of the site and the overall character of the surrounding neighborhood, with consideration given to the neighboring 3 lots containing 5,000 square feet, it is my opinion granting the requested relief will facilitate the improvement of the parcel as a single-family home, resulting in a more harmonious use of the property. Based on the established land use pattern, the planned development of a single-family home to the property is consistent with the character of the surrounding area and is harmonious to the surrounding area. And finally, in my opinion, there will be no negative economic impact on the neighborhood.
No, I think we can consider this either under the application of single and separate or under the balancing test. I do believe that we are meeting the five-factor test. I don't need to bore you with the details unless you'd like me to. I think that the character of the community will not be altered. There are no environmental impacts. There's no property impacts. This is, I think, in a way, an ability for the town to finish this development and to allow for an affordable house to be built in an area that could utilize that.
No, yes, I do have others. Mr. Chairman, I did have something to add, actually. Just to really finish up the thoughts there and to reiterate, again, planning does not think they have a single and separate argument here. Applicant is only entitled to one relaxation of the code. This has long been the case in the town of Islip based on case law. I don't think anything in the code is necessarily changed in such a way to change that. The thing being referenced here is a word for word was just relocated from a different part of the code to where it currently resides in the non-conforming section. So we don't really think the code has changed in a meaningful enough way for that not to still be true. Again, though, and he made both arguments there, with regards to the factors, planning actually does support this application. It's a very confusing situation where I disagree with the rationale, but I think the application itself is good, considering they have reduced the FAR, or rather, they are now proposing a conforming FAR and setbacks. While the single and separate determination is not necessarily true here, the history of the lot is important. The fact that it was part of the original subdivision at a time where it would have been a conforming lot. And we don't believe that this would necessarily cause an issue in this neighborhood. Every other parcel here is already developed. A single, well, not single and separate. Part of the original subdivision would not really necessitate or encourage further minor subdivisions in the area in a way that we think would be supportable or problematic. So it's really just developing one vestigial lot that's existed for 70 plus years undeveloped, and we don't think that would actually cause an issue with the nature and character of the neighborhood.
The only, just one other thing.
Sure.
I understand that argument that Mr. Armentano laid out, but on the single and separate, I mean, I've been on the board 15 years. We have followed the Cranston forever.
Which planning believes we still should be.
I never remember not following
Mm-hmm.
on the New York Court of Appeals, so I just don't know the rationale not following.
Well, the only thing that was saying is that if they were to get a single and separate determination, the point would be is that they would be entitled to being developed. What planning is saying is that they are not entitled under single and separate determination, which just means they're, limited by the factors of zoning, as a normal area variance would be.
And I don't want to affect the board's prior jurisprudence, so if you're not inclined to go for the single and separate and you're inclined to grant a variance, we'll accept that and not alter. Well, I figured I'd offer something. I thought if we can decide this on the area variance criteria, we would be more than willing to accommodate that. And this was an interesting case to study, and I just appreciate your time on this.
Before we decide, one is the men to call the meeting to remove reference to the side yards and the floor areas.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, everybody, we have 13 accessory apartments and two family use onlys to renew for a period of 3 years.
Motion. Second? Second. All in favor? Aye.
And we have one decision to read into the record.
Is it involving the code?
Nope.
Nope.
No.
We'll just change it to 4-0.
It's McCabe and Wexler.
Yeah.
Sounds like a law firm.
We have followed Cranston forever.
I just don't
Dick.
think you even make a decision here, just give me, approve the application, but don't deal with the single and separate.
This is everybody's recollection of this one, right?
Dick argued that up
more to read.
I'm so
Ken.
passionate about Grant Street.
There you
I'm so passionate about it.
go. Okay.
Don't hate when people do this.
In accordance with the proposed written decision dated March 18, 2025, the application of Chauncey Barone, 776-24, is dismissed without prejudice. On motion of,
Motion?
Second? All in favor? Aye.
carried by a vote of 4 to nothing, Mr. Nicolia being absent. Thank you, that's a wrap.
That's all right.
Thank you.
Like Charles